Olaf asks, there are many ZFS replication tools. Is there one that can handle replication to a non-ZFS target like S3? Using a tool that writes to a non-ZFS medium is not how we typically refer to replication in ZFS, but there are some options. The first is an application like rclone, or there's many other similar tools, and they can back up ZFS to other protocols, including S3 and S3-like protocols, Backblaze's B2, things like Microsoft OneDrive, Google Cloud, or Apple iCloud, or even other tools like Dropbox and hundreds of other options. Other thing you can do is there are open source tools like Bacula, which is a backup software, and while it doesn't use ZFS to do the backup necessarily, it can leverage ZFS. So Bacula can use the ZFS diff command to more quickly identify which files were modified by comparing the previous snapshot to the current system and be able to take the backup more quickly that way. But whatever method you choose to make a backup, be sure to always use the snapshot as the source of your backup so you get a consistent copy of every file in your backup versus trying to back up a live system. Ruben asks, have you ever encountered specific ZFS features or configurations that resulted in unexpected behavior, like performance issues or hard drive degradation? All the issues I've ever seen were specific to the hardware or the selection of the hardware. There was one particular generation of SAS hard drives that developed bad sectors, not in the ZFS label area, but adjacent to it. And this only happened probably because that space was never actually written to, whereas the space beside it was written to continually. We've also seen examples of people building systems using really low endurance flash as the S-log, and this wearing the device out very quickly. But again, that was hardware selection. It wasn't ZFS's fault. I'm not aware of ZFS ever breaking hardware or exposing issues. It's just ZFS is able to detect hardware that's misbehaving and tell you about it where another file system might not have noticed. Jason asks, what are your favorite long-standing features or tools in ZFS that have not changed and have proven their value over time? I'd say ZFS replication. It really hasn't changed. It's still backwards compatible to very old versions. There was one minor tweak when we added the ability to resume a replication, and that made a really big difference. But I would say that's part of ZFS that hasn't changed and is the most interesting. Ruben asks, can you talk about the long-term wear and degradation of SSDs? What about over-provisioning or dealing with wear leveling issues over the long term? A lot of the issues that came up were with early SSDs, where, for example, the wear leveling might cause a long garbage collection pause, where the drive would not be able to do other I/O because it was busy moving things around in the background. But firmware has gotten a lot better since then. In general, drives do still wear out, but most, especially enterprise class drives, have huge endurances. And as the capacity has increased, while the endurance per terabyte maybe hasn't gotten that much better, we have so many terabytes of endurance now that it is not that common for a device to wear out. Alexander asks, I'm building a service with a ZFS backend, and I'll be granting users access to specific datasets. I've already sanitized which SSH commands they can run, and I'm using ZFS permission delegation to restrict what commands the user can run. Are there any other best practices I can take to improve security? And does using Docker add any extra separation? So Docker specifically doesn't necessarily add any extra separation, but if you're using ZFS jails on FreeBSD or Linux namespaces, which is what Docker would use, you can create a container and assign a dataset to it. And then the users inside that container can only see the datasets that have been assigned to that container. This can further enhance the security beyond what you've already discussed by ensuring that when they run ZFS list, they will only see their datasets and the direct parents, whereas if it was outside of the container, even if they can't access those other datasets, they'd be able to enumerate them with ZFS list. When you combine that with maybe even more ZFS permission delegations, you can ensure the user can only access the data that they're intended to. Thomas asks, one of the tuning strategies suggested in the Clara Basecamp articles is setting the record size for a VM to 64 kilobytes. But on Proxmox, VMs are created on ZVOLs, and ZVOLs don't have a record size. What do I do? So ZVOLs actually do have the equivalent to a record size, it just has a different name. It is the vol block size. But this property must be set when the ZVOL is created. It can't be changed after, like the record size on a dataset. But similar to the record size on a dataset, the file is created based on what that property was set to when the file was created. So a ZVOL, you have to set the vol block size when you create it. In modern ZFS, the default vol block size is 16 kilobytes. But in Proxmox, they default to forcing it to 8 kilobytes. While our general recommendation of 64 kilobytes is a good general recommendation, each VM workload is different, and a smaller vol block size may be more performant in many cases. Depending on your pool layout, too small of a block size could waste space or end up disabling compression. So there's a lot more that goes into it. For a ZVOL, I'd recommend 16 or 32 kilobytes versus the 64 you would use on a dataset.